Hello, everyone. Hi there. We just trying to start on time because there's so much to talk about. I am Kathleen McLeod, and I live in La Cienega. I am, for no other reason, I've been handed the title of PFAS Subcommittee Chair. And what that means is that I live in La Cienega. I live on Torcito Loop, and this issue of PFAS is very close to home. My well did show up with some PFAS 6 to be exact in November. So anyway, that's how I got here. I'm obsessed at this point. So tonight we have special speakers. I just want to introduce Amy Ewing. We'll be speaking on, if some of you may know, PFAS. It's a kind of a funny word. It encompasses a huge amount of what are called forever chemicals. They're insidious and they are in soil as well as water. So one of the ongoing projects with the city and the county is to test the soil and the water at what we used to call the wastewater treatment plant, which many of us will probably still call it that, but the new proposed name, Paseo Real Water Reclamation Facility. What's that? That's in really? Okay, so for everyone like me who calls it the wastewater treatment plant, this is the thing. Yeah, okay, we all know what we're talking about. So anyway, she's going to be presenting on that. And I believe John D.Craig will be here from the city as well. So again, a water specialist. And I'm going to talk a little bit about filtration because it seems like there's a lot of, again, this is based on my experience of trying to get my water safe for my family. So anyway, I have a few notes that have come up because I'm having someone put in the system, a well system next week. So many questions have come up. So I will be doing a little bit on that. But first we want to hear from Shelley and Andrea, LCVA. Updates, anything?
Oh, I'll just say hello. I'm Andrea Crawford. I'm the president of the La Cienega Valley Association, and we co-host these meetings with the county. And so Shelley, Kathleen, and I are, we're an unstoppable team. So that's where it's at. So welcome.
And Shelley is our liaison with the county. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to give my usual updates that I give every month at these meetings. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah. I also just want to say that we have Spanish translation available this meeting. Nancy is here in the back. She's going to raise her hand. I don't know if anybody would like to sit next to her. She's going to be simultaneous translation throughout the meeting. So if you feel more comfortable hearing some of the things in Spanish, you can just pull up a chair next to her and go for it. So I'm Shelley Moeller, and yes, I'm the liaison with the county. My background is public health. I'm not a water specialist. It's more of the public health impacts from environmental contamination of which PFAS is. So that's really why I was invited to participate and really contract with the county to bring information to you all, to be a liaison of communication between the government entities that are responsible for addressing the PFAS contamination and bringing that information to you all and then bringing your concerns back to them so we can just make sure that there's open communication and you all know what's going on as a community that's being impacted and you know what's going on with remediation and investigation and potentially mitigation. And with that, there are specific entities that are responsible or are taking responsibility for just understanding the extent of this contamination. And one is the county and the city and the Army National Guard are really, I guess, at this point, the three main government entities that are looking into characterize this contamination. So what I do at these meetings every month, hi, welcome, sit down. We have Spanish translation available.
I know what I don't understand breakers.
Oh, you are? Great. You see Nancy sitting over there. So here's our other translators. Yeah. Both Nancy and Sonia do work for the county, and they do different stuff. I don't know, maybe we should have you introduce yourselves. When I'm done chatting, it'd be great to have you just tell everybody a little bit about yourselves and the other things that you do at the county. So my first update is with Santa Fe County. They have the home rehabilitation, energy efficiency grant program, and it is a program where households countywide can apply for grants to make changes to their home. There's an income qualifier. The grant application is online. It opened up in early June, and I just wanted to give you an update. And testing your wells for PFAS is one thing that you can do under this program. And are you all familiar with it? Should I say a little bit about it, or
How many people know about the grant? Raise your hand if you know about it.
yeah? Okay. So it's a grant program. You apply online. If you qualify, then testing your well can be one of the things that are looking for. Yeah, and there's a flyer on the table in the back. Thank you, guys. I just got Invisaligns, and so it's really hard for me to talk, and it's really distracting still, so it's part of my distraction going on here. But with the Home Rehabilitation and Energy Efficiency Program, there's been a total of 249 applications received by the county. A lot of them come in and they're not complete, but 58 of those are complete, and 191 are in the process that people will get assistance with completing their applications. Like sometimes not all the documentation is there. The 50 applications that are complete, 25 have qualified for assistance, and now we're waiting for their home assessment. And of those 25, 8 do include water testing. And it doesn't have to just be for PFAS, it can be for other contaminants. But not all of those are in Cienega, and I don't even know Cienega or Cienega, and I don't know the exact number of how many. So that's that update. The other update is that the Santa Fe County received a grant from the New Mexico Environment Department to characterize this contamination. Hi, John. And they have found a contractor, so they went through a whole procurement RFP process. They have identified a contractor, and they are in the process of negotiating that contract. And once all that is in place, I will invite that contractor to come here and explain to you what their process will be to characterize that contamination. So that should all be in place in a couple weeks. And the other update is from the Army National Guard. They are doing a remediation investigation, and the program manager for that will be back in Santa Fe in September, and they will come to this meeting on September 19th. And they will explain to you their whole process for the remediation investigation. And part of that process does include community input. So come back, hear about it, figure out what their community input process is, tell your friends, tell your neighbors. It'd be great to get a pretty high turnout for that meeting. And then, the other update really pertains to the city of Santa Fe and their PFAS sampling project of the water reclamation facility. And we have Amy Ewing and John Dupuy, who is the Director of Public Utilities for the City of Santa Fe, here to tell you all about that process. And they've already done one sampling of the water, and they have results, so they're going to share that with you, and this is your opportunity to ask questions and learn more. And with that, I think I'm just going to ask Nancy if you just want to stand up and just say some things about yourself, and so people, also tell your neighbors we have Spanish translation of these meetings going forward. So, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Nancy Toscano with Santa Fe County. I work with the Community Services Department with the program Connect. And what Connect does is we connect people to resources in our community, basic needs, transportation, rental assistance, and things like that. And my training is in interpretation for the judicial system, and I want to learn new things, and I'm happy to help and interpret for anybody that needs it.
Thanks, Nancy. And Sonia?
Hi, I'm Sonia Bertola. I'm case manager with Santa Fe Community Engage. It is a LEAD program, so it's a law enforcement assisted diversion program. I work with the Sheriff's Department, Edgewood PD, Public Defender's Office, DA, and basically it is a referral program, so anybody that gets referred into our program, they get a case manager. I'm the only one right now in this program. It's just myself and our program manager. And we have a clinical supervisor who does contract work with us, but right now we have like about 21 referrals, so 21 people, including like their family members, whether it's their mom, children, whatever it is, and we try to support them in whatever it is that their needs that they're going through. So unfortunately, a lot of this does have to do with substance use, and but it is what I've been doing here with the county for about 4 months. Previously with the city.
Okay, great. That's all of my oh yes, okay, we have one more announcement. There has been, so we have Commissioner Bustamante here. There's a new grant program that will support well testing, and I'll just turn it over to you, Commissioner, to say more.
Thank you. A couple of things. I do want to give you just an update on what we're making sure is going to happen with the $500,000 study that the county is doing. One of those that was not specifically called out were we've heard that the county wants to bring water, make sure that it's available, but we hadn't really heard anything about what about pump and treat. And then we were told, yeah, well, that's just too difficult and it wouldn't necessarily be something that we would evaluate. And the answer is, yes, we will evaluate pump and treat. I think that people in this community, if they say it's not going to be possible, then I want to hear what would make it possible. And if it's something that would take 40 years, like Clovis, well then put in what would take 40 years and what would need to happen so that it wouldn't take 40 years. Because I don't think that people with senior water rights are going to accept we're going to bring water in and you're going to hook up to county water and start paying for it without some type of evaluation as to whether or not our water can be made pristine again. So that will be part of the study. The next thing is after, well actually at the onset, even when the county was working on being able to have the grant that has allowed the home improvement work, there was an obvious need to get people support in being able to have their well sampled. So I applied for a grant. This is not the county's application to the Santa Fe Community Foundation. This was a grant that I applied for to the Santa Fe Community Foundation that is being executed through the fiscal agent, which is Amigos Bravos, for individuals who can't afford to have their well tested, and there is a threshold, and we will have the form, and there will be conditions for the funding to be available, but that money, where was I going? I'm sorry, I have had a really long day, so I'm like, where was I with what I was saying? That money is available, there will be conditions. Oh, and the thing that really broke my heart, and I don't see the woman here tonight, but I think Kathleen might remember who it was someone who literally had her receipt clutched in her hand, because we did say in meetings here, those of you who have your well tested, keep your receipt. And there was a woman who said, I took a loan out that I can't pay for. And I just found out today that this county grant won't reimburse me. And I can't afford to pay back my loan. This really hurts. So she took the steps necessary to see what she could do, or if she had it, and she can't be reimbursed. I hope that something has happened with the county to be able to go in and remediate, but this grant will allow for people who meet that financial threshold to be reimbursed for their tests, okay? I will say one of the conditions is probably going to be which company they worked with. For example, if they went in and all I had to do was pour some water into a mayonnaise jar and send it to Oklahoma, and they let me know, that probably won't fly because you're going to get all kinds of other variables in there. So it's going to have to be one of those that's been approved, but the good news is, if it's not, then we'll cover it to do it again, okay? As well as it will be a consent element, because the reason for this funding being allowed is so that they can map, and it will never be provided publicly, but that we can assure that every place, it's to get a better scope of where the contamination lies. Let me just say it that way, okay? The clue, where it is. So if there's somebody's like, I haven't and I can't pull it together to pay for it, but nobody in this area is tested and I can't afford it, this is to say, look, then let's help you afford it. Let's get you there. Let's put this in as a priority so that we know where this plume is. if it is a plume or if it's a line, but yeah, right? We want to just understand the parameters, okay?
Quick question. Is it based on homeowners that need to apply for this or can renters apply?
The renters should talk to their homeowners, but we can actually run that through Amigos, okay? I'm gonna say that the conditions are very specifically to get those areas that have not been tested. So I'll need to see what the implications would be legally for someone to go take the test for someone, and it's not their property to disclose so. So, you know, it might have its own other issues.
Is there a map of areas that have been tested?
That is something that we will also need to
Because you're
get.
saying it's an area that's been, it's outside the area that's been tested, but we don't know what's been tested.
That's right, and that's when this comes out, we will know. So you're
Will
absolutely,
that be made public?
absolutely. We will let, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're working out these details. We can't just say all the areas and then not tell people where things are. So yes, we will know where it's been and where it's not. And, you know, I hope that once we are able to say that, you would be able to go to folks in that area and say, you know, no one's tested in your area. Can you, you know, would you like to, or how can we make sure? I hope that we'll be able to, you know, get together as a community and do that kind of tapping on the shoulder as well.
As a community, we all need to have our wells tested, so whether you can afford it or not, I think the county should be reimbursing.
The county wasn't responsible for the plume, and it is a anti-donation because it's your private wells. The county won't be able to pay for people's wells to be tested. The grant, I will do everything I can to make that threshold, but there are private wells I paid out of my pocket. I understand that everybody needs it done. You know, eventually we can find the source of the contamination and say, you know, but that's going to take time, and we want to do something. I just wanted to make sure there was something in place for those who can't, and if, because those who can probably already have.
Yeah, I went ahead and did it. I have 2 side-by-side properties, but because I had an autoimmune disease,
Yeah.
I needed to get it tested.
Yeah.
And I needed to know that the filter I was buying could actually do what they said it would do. So I paid $1,500 to have the good test done and know that I had some contaminants. But whether I can afford it or not, I shouldn't be punished because I can afford it by not being reimbursed through the grant. That is my opinion, and
Commissioner Bustamante, I think
one of
I'm gonna talk about filters
Good,
and all
yeah,
that, so.
and I hear what you're saying. I'm gonna tell you the part that's important to hear is that there may be conditions that people really have to get it done. The grant itself, and again, the county isn't the culprit, if you
I
will.
understand, I
So,
misspoke about
yeah.
the county, but I
Yeah.
meant to say grant.
Well, the grant, we're gonna do what we can. And we'll do what we can.
Yeah, and I can
Thank
say
you.
that the commissioner's been working
Yeah.
really hard
This
to
is really
create
good.
programs that are not in violation of anti-donation clause, which is a super challenge.
That's the point to get this, but they also have their parameters for being able to make that money available. And I'll do whatever I can to make it, as, you know, but
Definitely appreciate you, definitely.
we want to make sure that those who have the least ability. The other thing that broke my heart, thank the translators for being here, was we had individuals who literally walked out of the last meeting that I attended because they couldn't understand what was being said. So if you have neighbors, please, if they don't speak English, or let's do something to reach out to those individuals who had come. We had put signs up that were bilingual, and we had people coming in who spoke Spanish only, and then we weren't able to accommodate their understanding what was happening. So whatever we can do to help people understand. We're a community, we're trying to do our best to work together. I appreciate everyone being here, and anything I can do, let me know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bustamante. So that's the perfect lead-in. Again, I'm Kathleen. And so we have these long-term situations determining the plume, you know, cause and effect and all that remediation. But there's an immediate need, which you just expressed, and I'm one of those people as well, for safety, you know, for your home. So what I have experienced, I live on Torcida Loop. I received a phone call from my neighbor who was one of the test wells back in the fall, and he said, "Don't drink your water, this is going on." And so my life changed at that point. And I proceeded with buying water and freaking out, just buying water, which I did not like at all. And then we ended up putting a reverse osmosis system under our sink. And that was in January, February. But all the research that I did, it was like going into a little strange, web, it was a rabbit hole, to say the least, and it was snake oil rabbit hole. So there was a lot of fancy websites, a lot of talk, I'm not a chemist, I'm not a hydrologist, but I can read BS, and it felt a little salesy to me, a lot of the sites. So I am here to share with you my experience in walking down this, and I'd love to hear from others, and that's what I would like to see more of. How many of you have dealt with putting in any kind of filter in your house? 30, 40% maybe, I'm just guessing. Okay, so you probably can relate to what I'm saying here. So I'm really happy that Commissioner Bustamante, this is a huge thing, because how do we know if we're putting in something that's right? There are a lot of products out there that are claiming to be, we've told people NSF, National Science Federation, or ANSI, which I can't remember, but they're the two certifications that you want, and we've been putting out this message these last few months in this group. You want them to be at 53 or 58. When you're buying a product for to clean your water, those are the two magic numbers. And indeed, I've been looking, searching, I'm dealing with someone who's a local company here, and no one can provide those specs for me. So Cyclopure is another place that people are talking a great deal about, and Carl, I saw Carl. Carl, you're in sunlight, I can't see you. You're backlit. He sent me something recently, because Cyclopure is in Chicago. So in other words, I've been deeply in the rabbit hole with all these products. What I liked about Cyclopure, thank you for the article, Carl, it is 2022, it could be 1900 in terms of how much has changed with PFAS. So it's a couple of years old. However, this little QR code, I'm going to put this on the table. If anyone wants to scan it, it'll be the latest update of their findings. They are doing research development. They've also been certified for chlorine, for other things. They have not been certified for PFAS in particular. And what I'm gathering from everyone I'm speaking to is that the certification process, any of us have been in business or government, it moves slowly. And I think that it's not caught up. So it's putting out one standard that maybe is working for municipal water systems or something, but it hasn't hit testing the components that I've been able to find. So we're saying these numbers, but good luck. And if you find someone who really has the standardization, please share that information with us. Great. I need to know what that is. So, and I did print out, we also have another, so some of the Consumer Reports did an article recently, and I put a copy of that on the table back here, and they have the NSF the right standards. So they've printed out, the deal with filters too is also the whole house, the under the sink, I might be forgetting one, the on the counter, and pitcher. So if someone's renting a home and their landlord is not particularly interested or responding to their request to get the water tested or whatever, I've been recommending get an NSF, certified pitcher at least, or something under the sink. So there are just all these needs. The really hard part, and now that we have Commissioner Bustamante and the HREE, because testing again. So installing a system is only as good as keeping up with it, and then testing to find out if it's even working. And like you, I'm paying all this out of pocket, and I don't qualify for the loans, the grants. And a lot of people don't. And most landlords probably don't. So it's the tenants that I'm really concerned about, the people that are renting and not getting this information. So please check through my latest highlighted Consumer Reports with my notes. I'd love to talk to you at some point. Anyone else who has found good products that they're happy with, we need to share.
And I have them tested.
Great,
So
that's what we need to know. Because believe me, I will be wanting to test, but I'm just going to say like, $500. And the reimbursement, because a lot of these places are saying, we'll test your water for $79 at Cyclopure. And it may not hold up to get reimbursed with that. I spent 500 at Hall's Research, which was one of the certified New Mexico labs in November. So and now I'm telling my own friends who are asking me, skip the water testing, just get a system, just get a filter. Okay.
Just one thing, but also we did have a presentation just on filtration
Yes.
systems. It's on the La Cienega Valley Association website. I put some updates into that website, but it's gonna get a complete overhaul. So, you might have to look around a little bit, but it's there if you look for
And
it.
it was helpful, yes. I say one other thing is last week we had, this is also why you want to filter your water. I was just sent by someone else, something from The Guardian, a very recent article, June 2024, that indeed there's research showing that PFAS do and can and do permeate the skin. Yeah, just to throw in to more fun with PFAS. And I will put this, and the science is in the back of it, which is super chemistry. The People's article is in the front, but it's The Guardian, it's good, it's got science behind it. It's just another reason you might want to consider a whole house filtration system at some point. The most important thing is where you're eating, drinking, any food you're cooking, rice, potatoes, beans, anything that takes up water, washing your vegetables, get a filter of some kind. Filter your water. Like we said, go check out these articles, talk to this woman over there. I'll share whatever I know, but make sure it's a really good PFAS certified.
And there's a table in the back.
That's all the stuff.
Filtration.
Right. And those are from Walmart and Target. However, beware, as the article that I have highlighted there, beware of false promises, and when they say a filter lasts 6 months, that is a lie. It's like your vacuum filter. There's no way for them to know what's going through it or how long it's going to last. And with that, I think I say, yes. So all of this is here. If you want to look up cyclopure, I'll put that there. So it's just so important. It's why we started all this, And then we have years of, remediation and things like that to look forward to. So thank you all, and we'll begin. Yes, Amy. Amy is a hydrologist. Is that right? Yes. And she's the report on the soil and water testing at the Paseo Real wastewater treatment. How's that?
That works.
Okay, good.
Okay, good. So as you said, my name is Amy Ewing, and I was here a couple years ago. Maybe some of you were at the meeting about the domestic well project, but I was involved with that a few years ago. Nancy, do we need to do? No? Okay. So I'm going to talk about a project that we're doing for the city. I work at a company now called Hazen and Sawyer, and we're a consulting engineering firm. So we're working with and we have treatment people, so actually this was a good, I'm gonna ask them some questions and get with Kathleen, but they do more, big municipal system treatment, but they still know about the household treatment, so I'll report back some information about that to Kathleen that she can disseminate. But I'm gonna tell you a little bit about a project that we're working on now for the city. Background, I don't think anyone here needs a background, but we'll just cover it anyway. So wastewater treatment facility, that's what we're talking about here. The land, it's about a 40-acre area around the facility. It was historically used for land application of sludge. When you treat wastewater, you pull the solids out of the wastewater, and a very common practice to deal with that was land application, not just here. National, that was general practice. So that was done here for decades. It's not done anymore. Now that material gets trucked to a landfill. So that happened, and then since that happened, the city brought in some soil and seeding kind of hydromulch material after that practice ended, to seed the area. You're trying to reclaim. We're not doing that anymore. So bringing in the seed to hopefully get some native plants going. And then, so what we're doing now is a sampling project to see, are there PFAS at that facility? So our work is like the Army National Guard is just looking at their little spot. This sampling is looking at a larger spot than that, but it's the facility, the water reclamation facility property, and we have a map here in a few. So there are 7 monitor wells that exist already, they're already out there. So those are available to be sampled, and that's what we're sampling for the groundwater. So this is our first map, and that's just showing the location of the facility, which you all are very familiar with, so we don't need to spend a lot of time on that.
I don't know, Amy, can you just orient people? I mean, would that be helpful, just to orient people to what's what?
Just circle it with your finger.
So this location down here, and here's the airport, and here's the water reclamation facility. The outfall, the treated water, the outfall goes to the Santa Fe River, which runs, right along back here. And then the city of Santa Fe is further to the northeast.
And we're off the corner.
And we're off down here.
Yeah.
That's right. We're in the community down here. I should have zoomed out more. So this, it's a little difficult to see, but I'm gonna maybe come over here. So this is a little bit zoomed in area of the runways at the airport and the facility property. So the wastewater treatment facility is over here, and the river, is back here, and the outfall is right about in here somewhere. So that's the facility where the water's treated. But over here, this whole area was, and this Army National Guard facility is in the middle of this area. That area was used for that land application. For decades, that's the area where that material was spread. So this site is regulated by the New Mexico Environment Department, and these wells get sampled for different things, but they hadn't been sampled for PFAS. So there are 7. So here's number 1, 2, 3. This is kind of what we say upgrading of the facility. So I'll show you about groundwater flow direction in a few minutes, but this one is before anything's happening on this property. You have this one over here, number 3. Number 4 is over here, closer to the outfall and by the plant, away from this area of land application. 5, 6, and then 7 way down here. And some of these areas for the Army National Guard, some of the sampling that they did in their site inspection had some soils, PFAS contamination, and it just, there are some of those areas were part of the land application area historically for the city. That was happening before that facility was built, the Army National Guard facility. So we're gonna have other maps with monitor wells, but I just wanted to give you an idea of where they are. Depth to water, so depth to water is on the order of 130 to 190 feet in these wells. I think the community wells, some of them are more shallow even than that, but not terribly deep. So our current project, what we're doing right now is collecting 4 quarters of groundwater samples from these 7 wells. We've done 1, and I'm going to talk about the results for that. And then we're going to sample again in September, same analyte, same 7 wells, again in December, again in March, because we don't want to just do 1 sampling event. We want to see what's happening over time, right? So we're going to do 4 events, and then depth to water. We measure that each time that you're sampling a monitor well. It's much more difficult to measure a water level in your home domestic well, but in a monitor well, these have dedicated pumps. But anyway, we measure the depth to water, and the reason that you do that is then you've surveyed those monitor wells, right? You have locations and elevation for that monitor well, and you can subtract the depth to water to, where the water is in your well from this elevation. You end up with an elevation of the water surface. And I'm going to show you what we call a potentiometric surface map, and that's a topo map of the water surface. So by making that map, we can tell which way the water's going. Like looking at a map when you're going to go hiking, which way is downhill. That's the same exact thing that we're doing here with groundwater. So with each event for sampling, we develop a map of the potentiometric surface, which is the topo map of the groundwater surface, and then do the sampling. So that's what you all are very familiar with. It's about $500 a sample, And it sounds like you know about labs, but I know about labs. If you need any information about labs, I have all that information too. So the first groundwater sampling event on this project was performed in June. And the report is almost finished. It's not quite finished, but it's almost finished. And when it is finished, it'll be publicly available. We're going to talk about the data now, but that's going to be released. So you can look at it again later.
Where will we find it?
I think we could probably provide it to Shelley and she can disseminate it to the list. But we'll get it for it's close. I was really trying to get it out today, but didn't quite make it. So it'll be soon. The other thing is that we did a soil sampling event, and I don't have that data yet, but it will be soon as well. And so now my print's pretty small, but I'll tell you that those samples were collected on July 3rd, and we did samples all around the facility at a depth of 2 to 3 feet below ground surface. And the reason that we did that depth was to see if there are PFAS at that depth across, the whole facility. And we wanted to get underneath whatever has been brought in on the surface. We don't want to sample the soil that got brought in later. We want to sample the native soil underneath that. And we also wanted to be able to do it by hand, right, with a hand auger, because it's much less expensive to do that, to see if you have a problem before you get a driller and go deeper. So it's a first cut. Do we have detections with a hand auger, and you clean it between samples so that you're not spreading something from one spot to another. And then the other thing, let's see, there was a third reason. Well, the land application, that was done at the surface, but it kind of, involved disturbing maybe 6 to 8 inches of the soil. So we were hoping to get below that, to collect those samples. So we did 11 samples like that. One of them was away from this area. So we went across the street to the north, away from the area, because we wanted a background sample, a control sample. What does the soil look like not on this land application area? We want to know what it looks like somewhere different. So we collected that too. And then we also collected, we like to do blank samples. So when you're washing that, you clean that auger between samples, then you did a liquid blank sample where you run the water, PFAS certified, PFAS-free water, over the clean instrument and send that in for analysis, because you want to make sure it's clean and it's not transporting anything to the next step. So that is what we have done so far, is one groundwater event, which is 7 wells, and then one soil sampling event. And then the method that we're using is EPA method 1633, and I think that's a different method than what you all are using for your homes. This would be a fine method for your homes, but this is a method that's the go-to method for all things not drinking water, and it has 40 analytes available in the method. So there's 2 drinking water methods, and those have 16 or 18, and 24 analytes. So this has more. If you want a complete list of what the EPA is looking at for PFAS constituents, you end up having to run both of those drinking water methods. So this is an alternative to that. This one is not, it doesn't have the certification for drinking water, but it's completely applicable to use out here, and 40 analytes. So that's recently been finalized, this method. It was a draft method until just a few months ago. It's now the final method. This is what the Department of Defense and this is what they're using going forward, is this method. So that's what we're doing. So this is the potentiometric surface map for June. So we don't expect that to change a lot. Things aren't going to reverse, but we'll make a new map each event. So these are the contour lines, like our topo map. And so you see here 6,159 feet, right? And down here 6,454, right? So there's a 4-foot difference in the surface of the groundwater. That's, it's going that way, right? But we're able to look at these elevations that I was mentioning. Those are calculated by looking at the the surveyed elevation of the top of the well, and then we put a measuring tape that's meant for this down the well that has a sensor that rings and makes a noise when it hits water. So you get your depth to water, 170 feet or whatever, it's to the 100th of a foot, but you get your measurement of how, what's the measurement from the top of my well to water, and then you subtract the elevation and the depth to water from the elevation, you get this elevation down here. So these blue contours are showing what's the water surface elevation, and you need at least 3 wells to be able to triangulate to figure out what's happening, right, with your direction of flow. But we have 7, actually 6 have been utilized here. Number 4, we don't have a elevation that's the surveyed elevation. So as soon as we find that, we'll take that into account. But I can't do anything with the depth to water without that elevation. So that's why it doesn't have a number underneath it. It wasn't taken into account. But each of these 7 elevations was taken into account, and then the contour map was drawn, and then these contours are getting smaller, 59, 58, 57, they're going down. So the direction of groundwater flow is to the southwest across the site. So we'll come back to this, but it's important to understand the direction of flow. So here, I'm going to show you a table next. It's a little tricky to look at, but this is the bulleted stuff, and I'll talk through it, and then we'll go back to the detention mesh surface map so you see where we saw detections across the site. So of the 7 wells that we sampled, there were no detections in 5 of those wells. So I think you guys know more about this than the regular person. But detections, you don't just say 0 when you're making a data table. 0 is not a real value. You only know as low as your method will look, And there's different methods that have different detection limits. Some of them are garbage, and you don't want to use some methods because it's not low enough to look at what we have here. But so when we get to our table, there's going to be a bunch of less than values, and that means that we looked for it and we didn't see it below this amount. This concentration is what we could see with the method. So 5 of the 7 wells had no detections. 2 field blanks were collected and neither have any detections. So why that's important, a field blank is, did I wear sunscreen out there and collect my sample and contaminate the water? There's PFAS in makeup and lotion and bug spray and everything, right, at different concentrations. But we don't want to go out there and sample and contaminate the sample. We want the sample to reflect what's in the well, right? So it's very important when you're sampling to be sure that, we have protocols about our person out there can't wear any of that stuff today. Can't wear Vortex or Teflon or, there's all the things you want to avoid when you're doing a sampling project, and you wear gloves, obviously, and all the things. But you collect some field blanks, which is like what I was talking about with the auger, when you run water over that piece of equipment to see, was that clean? Same thing. You fill an empty sample bottle, and you number it like a normal, a lot of times a normal sample, the lab may not even know that's a pretend sample, but you do it to make sure I didn't mess something up, like in the field, I didn't get, cause the problem in the sample bottle. So that's important because that means that the scientists that did the collection did a good job. They didn't have detections. If you have field blank detections, then whatever analyte you're seeing, you want to take data in your real samples with a grain of salt. Oh, I saw this at this level, so if I have a similar detection of the same thing, it doesn't necessarily mean anything. I may have caused the problem, but in this case, we didn't have any, so that's great. Okay, so the real data. MW4 had 1 detection for PFAS at a concentration of 2.67 nanograms per liter. So nanograms per liter, that's parts per trillion. And that's what those are the units that we're talking about for water, for PFAS. So 2, that's really close to the detection limit that I'll show you here in a minute with the others, but nonetheless a detection. And then MW1 had 8 detections. And I'll tell you which analytes those were for. And those range from 2.24, so that's on the order of almost too small to see, but then up to 21.7, so that's not too small to see. You can see that. Just 21. So that's the range for MW1 that we saw. So 8 different PFAS compounds. Out of the 40 that we looked for, we saw 1 in one well and 8 in the other. And that's probably a good stopping place. Go ahead with your
How
question.
many samples did you take for each well? You got 1 on one and 8 on another. Was every well tested 8 times or 25 times?
Each well has 1 sample that's collected, but then that sample gets analyzed for, you can sample for lots of stuff, right? So in this case, we're only sampling for PFAS, but we're sampling for 40 different PFAS. This method is the best, longest list. So Army National Guard is testing for 5 analytes in the past. I don't know what they're going to do for their new study, but they have looked for 5, we have looked for 40. So of the 40, we saw 1 in one and 8 in the other, and I'm going to pull up the list so you can see which ones. But then, so what do they mean? What does the data mean? So these aren't drinking water wells. They're, they're facility wells. So the drinking water standards don't actually, they're not enforceable for this facility, but we still care. We still compare those standards to the data. Similar, those drinking water standards, they're not enforceable on your domestic wells, but we sure care. We still look at it because those limits, those standards are being adopted based on public health, right? So we have compared to the MCLs, that's the maximum contaminant levels that you all are aware of that the EPA has adopted just now in April for a small subset of PFAS. And then the other screening levels that are that we are comparing data to are from the New Mexico Environment Department, and they're a little bit older, but they're based on health risk assessment. And those screening levels were put together by the Groundwater Quality Bureau and the Hazardous Waste Bureau. So those, there's some numbers for that I'm going to show you on my table in one moment. So the bottom line for those things is that all of the detections, the 9 detections, 8 in one well and 1 in the other, all of those are lower, they're below the screening levels for the Environment Department numbers at this facility. However, when you say, well, I still want to know how they compare to those EPA numbers for drinking water, even though we're not going to drink the water out of these monitor wells, we're going to drink water in the community, downgrading it, right? Because we looked at the direction of groundwater flow. It's not really angling at La Cienega from this facility, but further down gradient is La Cienega. So we do compare to those MCLs. So there is 1 exceedance of PFOA in MW1. So the standard is 4 nanograms per liter for this analyte, and the number in this well in June was 7.03, if I can see that correctly. So there's 1 exceedance of the drinking water standard and no other exceedances. So that's what we have in June, and we're going to look at it on a table because maybe that's a little easier. And we're going to sample again. So that will happen in September and December and March is the plan for what we're doing out there. Again, in all 7 wells, all 40 analytes, 3 more times. So this is a table where we listed each of the analytes that were detected at all. So if it's not on this list out of the 40, then we didn't see it. It was looked for, we didn't see it. So this is the list that we saw. And then here you have these are the EPA numbers. So as you know, there aren't very many of them, but there's a standard of 4 nanograms per liter for PFOA and 10 nanograms per liter for PFNA and 10 for PFHXS and 4 for PFOS and 10 for this Gen X chemical. This one is not on some of the older methods. So I was just refreshing my memory on the Army National Guard data, and they don't even have data for this one, but it's available. I assume that they'll use the same method that we are for their continued sampling, and so that should be available, but we're not detecting it. This hazard index is a thing that we won't talk about super involved, but that's part of EPA's MCL. So they have standards for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 analytes. Then they have this other thing that's this hazard index that's some math of looking at those analytes plus one more, and you put them in a formula and you see what you get, and it's a unitless calculation. So they don't want to, so this is looking at, fine, you know, you're looking at all these individual things, but what if you mix a lot of them together, you know? That's what that's trying to look at. So the standard for this hazard index is a 1.0. And so I plugged in the math for both of these, and for MW4, we have so many that aren't detected that we end up with 0. Like there's not enough in anything there. And the one thing we saw was so small of a concentration that math didn't turn into anything here. But MW1, when we fill it in, we get 0.7. So we're underneath the 1, but we're not at nothing. You know, we're at 0.7. So this, it's a little, so, and then, I didn't tell you, these are the numbers for the screening levels for the environment department. So again, it's a short list. It looks like we have them, you know, for the same analyte here as EPA has a drinking water standard. Same here, we have a screening level by NMED at no standard from EPA. Here, neither. Right here, there's one for each, you know. But anyway, we'll look at all the screening levels available for us. So these are where it says NS, that means there isn't one for that analyte for this, you know, this screening level. So this is here for comparison purposes. And then here we have the June data for MW1 and MW4. So like I was mentioning, anytime you see a less than value, that means we didn't see it. But rather than saying 0, we say our detection limit in this sample for this analyte was this number, you know, 6 nanograms per liter. So we didn't see it. So we're confident at this number that it doesn't exist. Like maybe it could be less than that, but that's the detection limit. So it's less than that. So less than 1.53 for these, you know, less than. So this one is not a less than. This is a detection. It saw it, and but these others it didn't see. Right. So this was the detection for this MW4. MW1 had these detections that and a few things that weren't, but there were 8 that were detected. So the 2 high ones here in the sample are on the order of 21 nanograms per liter. And then these others, here's one that was 14. These others are quite low. So this is I didn't put the 40 on the table because then we would have just drowned everything out with a lot more less thans. And we could have put all 7 wells on here too. But since there was nothing in the other 5, we didn't put them on this table. This is the summary of the June data for all 7 wells. And then this is just our lab. Is enthalpy is one of the ones that is the good one to use. Hall is fine. They're owned now by Eurofins, and so they send them to California. Nobody tests for PFAS in New Mexico, but enthalpy, we shipped them to California. Eurofins ships them to California also. There are a number of different labs, but we're using enthalpy for this analysis, and the method is listed there again. So I'm just bringing it back now to the potentiometric surface map because we don't necessarily remember where the wells were. So number 4 is, and it's actually 4A up here because at one point, sometimes your well, you know, is damaged and you have to replace it. So this is a different, there was a 4 out there and now there's a 4A. But this one is the one that had 1 detection. So this wouldn't be caused by whatever land application stuff happened because land application didn't happen over here. right? So this is the well that had 1, and this is the well that had 8 detections, and then these all have none. So that's the map of what we have. I would say that I was looking at this Army National Guard data to see, so it's, hard to compare because it should be similar, but they used a different method because it was done before this method was finalized. But their numbers, they got some like 30s and 130, 230 nanograms per liter. So some of those numbers are significantly higher than what we saw here. In MW1, there were 2 analytes that were 21 nanograms per liter. So that's the data for June. And we'll resample and see if anything changes out there. And each of these reports will, when they're finalized, they'll be available. Go ahead.
Just very quick, are any of the wells that the city is using for testing the same wells that were used by the Army National Guard in their testing?
No,
They're separate?
no, they are totally separate. They have their own monitor wells that are all within this little triangle. And I think those 2 with the water, with the issues, they're like here, the ones that their data. So I'm really interested to see what their new sampling shows, and I really hope that it's for a longer list of analytes, than just 5. That would be helpful because there's likely multiple sources out here, and you can do, you can figure out, it's like fingerprinting. You can look at what you have here, and there's no PFOS here. So PFOS is down here. It's not detected. But in some of those, so my company did that sampling of your neighbor, those 6 samples that were collected back in October. We did that at the tail end of that domestic well project when we had some money left over. Water quality wasn't part of that project, but that needed to be done, and it was the county's idea to go out there and see, is it here? Presence absence isn't very many wells, but let's do it and see if it's here. So though there were some, wells with detections out of those 6, especially in North La Cienega, that did have PFOS. So we need to look, and Intera is a company that is going to be doing the characterization for the county. So they're going to need to look at all the existing data. We'll make ours available, obviously, to help them. And they will need to look at what's the fingerprinting between what we're seeing here and what you're seeing there and what you're seeing down at your other neighbors, and it may not all be the same. But that's why more analytes is better and not limiting to 5.
I was just going to say, is there any significance to PFOS? Like, why did you point that one out?
That is seen a lot with the use of AFFF. So the firefighting foam that's got a lot of PFAS in it. I did the work for NMED with trying to characterize the Cannon and Holloman plumes. And so that is AFFF. I mean, there's not multiple sources, that is the source for both of those situations. And so yeah, depending on what your source of contamination is, you get different laundry lists, different profiles of which ones you see and how much. And it's like there can be PFAS in wastewater, but there's more PFAS depending on what your customer base is, right? So Santa Fe doesn't have a lot of industrial customers, but places in the country where you have like all these big lawsuits and things going on where wastewater has been the source for PFAS, like paper mills, and there's all of these different sources that have screaming high PFAS contamination associated with them. So yeah, different fingerprinting of where it's coming from and what the source is.
Brian, I have a 2-part question. So I have FOSA in my valve, and I believe from my research, correct me if I'm wrong, FOSA is a PFAS.
It is one of them.
Right. And so I'm just below the 4.0, 3.5. So So once we know what chemicals we have in our wells as individuals, we can do some research and we can find out things like 50% of whatever you have taken into your body of PFAS can be eliminated through urine. What about the other 50% that's in your body? Are there things that you can do to help get that out of your body? Is this information that will be coming soon?
I don't think that there's any knowledge about that. So I don't, and we all have it in our bodies from our lives, you know, like in our kitchens and our everything, and our sunscreen. And, you know, not to in any way downplay what's going on up here, because, you know, that's legitimate
But
and
certainly if
worrisome.
you're drinking,
But, no, you want to not.
I've been drinking
Yeah.
it for 20 years. It's
Yeah.
a little different than
It
once a
is.
summer, putting
It
on
is.
a little sunscreen.
It is. I don't know of anything, but I'm not a toxicologist or a doctor. I don't know of anything you can do other than stop drinking it, you know, for sure. I don't know what you can do to get it out of your body, but stopping the exposure is paramount.
Yeah.
And for the characterization, you know, I'm really interested with what the commissioner was talking about with the sampling, the community sampling, because I've been wanting to be involved with this, you know. I thought that a lot of this widespread sampling would happen as a part of the characterization project. So I don't know what's gonna happen with that. But you don't, you know, for each individual home, obviously, you would like to have that information, you know? But on a environmental contamination project, for the company that's doing the characterization, for them, they don't need every single well, but they do need a sampling in order to be able to see, okay, this area, but not that area. But then they're gonna do some groundwater modeling to figure out, all right, well, if we, you know, and water levels are a little bit difficult, you know, we don't have a lot of information about the water levels between, say, where we just showed and you know, like there's a couple of miles in between. I don't know where you are specifically, but the communities, you know, like there's distance between there, the direction, you know, but there will be more water level information that needs to be, you know, obtained to look at that. And that project that we did a couple of years ago, the Bureau of Geology and Mineral Resources was our partner on the study, and they do some water level measurements out, you know, near La Cienega and upgrading of their only 10, you know, so that was one of the 10 wells once per year. That was one of the recommendations of that study was y'all need to do more. You know, the county needs to be looking at more water levels to better, that was before we knew that the PFAS was here, but to know what's happening with the groundwater. And you put that, you know, you put both this water quality information and the water level information into your model. You know, it's not perfect, but it's going to give you some idea about, all right, you know, we've got contamination in we've got maybe 3 or 4 samples here, but we're pretty confident these other homeowners in this, you know, these other residents probably have a similar problem. It depends on your well construction, you know, like you have your well, and depending on how deep it is and where the screen is, you may or may not have exactly the same water quality as your neighbor, because maybe your well's deeper than theirs, you know. So when you're trying to characterize this stuff, we know about the construction of these wells. A lot of times these domestic wells, especially the older ones, you sample them and you get this water quality information, but maybe nobody has the data about how deep it is or where the screen is. And so it's really difficult to know what you're dealing with because you don't have all the information. But you can install maybe some monitor wells somewhere, and then you'll know all about what you just put in the ground, and that'll be a way to collect more information in the future. But it gives you an idea of what you have, you know, that you do sampling and hopefully more sampling to understand what's happening, but the model will then show you how fast you think it might move and where. So then you can be sampling the next spot too, to make sure that you're going to see that coming, you know. And this is the same kind of thing like in Albuquerque. You've probably seen all about that bulk fuels, right? There's jet fuel contamination in the aquifer from the Air Force, And so this is the same type of project where they use monitor wells and they put specific monitor wells in the way to say, all right, we have this big supply well for Albuquerque right here, and we want to know before it gets here. We want to know way before it gets here if it's coming, so we can turn this guy off. I mean, you can treat the water, or you can just not use the well. But that's what all these kind of projects are all about, is trying to figure out what's happening and see where it may, predict what's going to occur to mitigate it.
Whether these chemicals disperse in the aquifers, university, depth, are they the full depth of the water, or are they going in slices, or,
I think they'll be well mixed, anywhere that it's gotten to, it's gonna just be well
can
mixed.
disperse?
It won't be like fuel, like you're thinking about, like some different types of gasoline, some of that type of stuff floats on top, that's
Right.
not happening here.
It's really water absorbent, really is well absorbed by the water, so
Yeah,
that
it doesn't break down. That's why they call them, there's like over, 800 of these things, right? Like, there's a lot of them. And yeah, forever chemicals, right? Like, what they do a really, really good job of what they're good at, which is, being in paint and being in raincoats and like wicking away water and being non-stick on Teflon pans and stuff. But then, it doesn't break down.
I just wanted to say that we also had kind of our last meeting was on the topic of health. So you may want to look at the video of the last meeting, which is available on our website. Yeah.
The other thing I would mention is that EPA, it took them a while, as you know, right, to pick these numbers, right? There was a lot of research and discussion and trying, there were no standards until April for any of these things. And now we have them for 5, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So those are the ones that are most health, have the greatest health effects.
The ones that have the O, the bad ones, and the higher ones.
They're picking, I would imagine that other standards would follow in time, for other contaminants, but those are the ones that you would especially want to be, if you're treating your house, you're treating for all of them, so that's great. But those are the analytes of most concern based on that's now the ones that we have standards for. I thought I'd add something else, but I'm not sure what it was.
I would just, I hate correcting, but it's important that we have as clear information as possible. So depending on what you're treating water from your house with,
Yes.
depends on if you're treating for all of them.
Yes.
And just like the subject came up earlier about the NSF, NSF has a search feature for every manufacturer and every product from that manufacturer and its configuration. So like, was it tested in whole house or not? And then how its effectiveness in every parameter. And often it's not extensive. Like, often it's only like PFOA and PFAS. They don't even go into that one.
Right.
And you need to change them, like it's the same thing with like a Brita filter at your house or whatever. Like, you can have it on the counter and whatever, but if you don't change the media, it stops being effective.
If you don't change the media, as in if you don't change the filter.
Right.
Yes. So is there a way to backtrack, like, I just tried to do it and I don't have Wi-Fi, but say I want to pop in one of these analytes and figure out what's the source, like going backwards. Is that easy to do? No. Yeah, okay. And then the other thing I was wondering is, I think the bigger question is, so what are you all going to do with this information? So you found like a certain type in that one well, and then can you theorize like what is the source, or what do you do, or?
We went through the presentation. I wasn't sure if you were kind of like at the end or.
Oh, no, this is what we have. So we're going to keep sampling, to see you don't wanna ever just have one event, you know, and actually, we had one other event, back in August, the same 7 wells, we sampled them once before. We used a different method at that time, there was only 24 analytes, not 40. And that method was what we used on those Cannon and Holloman projects, it was what DOD was doing in New Mexico then, you know? And so they should be comparable, and they are comparable, they're pretty much the same data as what you have here. But we're going to sample again and see, you know. And the soil data, I don't have it yet, but it's coming soon, so we're gonna look at that. And then if we have detections, then you would wanna look a little deeper, you know, you wanna see, well, if I have it here, then is it somewhere deeper, you know? And does it, you know, at some point you wanna know, does it get to groundwater? Like, you know, you wanna see that it does, and you're not detecting it anymore, you know? So there might be additional samples is what's next.
And that was actually one of my questions is, are you gonna do any shallower aquifer? Because so one of the things with National Guard, is that they think that the PFAS that they have found is in a percolated groundwater, perched, that's what it's called, perched groundwater table, so that it's like isolated from the actual larger groundwater table that we would get our drinking water from. And so one of the things I've been kind of curious about is, frankly, whether that actually exists, one, and two, you know, if any, because I have a lot of people out there have very shallow wells, and I've heard people hit water in some areas like 40 feet, maybe even shallower than that. So there may be some very shallow wells, so that's a question I have as well. And also, just one last thing, just to get it out there, is do you know if anybody's looking at the Santa Fe airport? That was my other question, so that's all.
You wanna answer something?
What's the ultimate
So,
plan?
first question was, what are we gonna do with that?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the answer is we're gonna share it.
Okay.
So, just starting off, ultimately, the more data you have, and the more consistent across an entire area that you have of that data, and it at the same time, you know, so like there's all these factors that unless you have a whole comprehensive approach, it makes it much harder to make certain conclusions, like to trace it back. Okay, so our goal originally, and I was at the county previous to working at the city, my goal is still the same, is to try to understand what the problems are and address them, just whatever they are. Part of what we recognized was if we could see the direction the Army National Guard was marching, no pun intended, which was to say, oh, it's perched, it's not going to be anywhere else. And it was like, okay, well, let's go look. And so ultimately, I subsequently was working at the city, and I was like, we're going to look, let's look. And I was collaborating with Michelle, and Michelle was like, I think I can get some community members to let us look at their wells. And I was like, you know, anything you need me to do to like make sure we do it together. So we ended up using the same company for like the reasons I'm explaining about having everything consistent at the same time helps you draw better conclusions. So I was like, we'll do ours, the county will do theirs, and we'll share the information. And so ultimately, we really need the support of someone that has a holistic plan how to stitch all this information together. But what we will do is share our information and provide access if we need to do something different. And ultimately, I'm trying to leverage our approval of Army National Guard sampling of our wells so that we can get better understanding of their data. And so like doing split samples where like we go sample their wells when they sample them, and then we test for everything. Like just because they didn't, then doesn't mean that we can't. But to get that access to ours, we want access to theirs. That kind of thing.
And what that really is good for, don't let me forget, I want to say something about the perched water, but that, we want water levels from those wells. And maybe the airport wells, you know, like we want water levels from more wells, because that map gets a lot better if it's based on more data points. But it's no good if I get their data out of their report. Like, especially out here with the wetlands, like there's huge swings in the water level seasonally out here, you know, so you cannot compare, you know, a lot of times when you're doing these maps, it's hundreds of a foot that you're, you know, that's differentiating between what, you know, you cannot use data from different seasons especially, but if we were able to go and sample their wells with them, you know, where we just show up with more bottles and that works for everybody, we can get their water level measurements today, or we can go over here and get measurements in our wells the same day so that we can draw a better map. And then we give this data to the contractor that's going to be trying to do the county characterization, because they don't have, you know, there's not enough money to do what's needed out here with the project. And so if you can get a head start with some information to focus your efforts a little bit more, you know, smartly, we want to help with that.
And is perched higher elevation?
Yeah.
Perch needs isolated.
Perched is a more shallow aquifer, and they do have perched water, you know, they have seen that at the facility. It's generally not continuous, you know, it's not gonna be everywhere. And then as you get closer to the river, as you're talking about with your neighbors that have really shallow wells, the water level is much more shallow. So the perch stuff, and a lot of times you've created it by putting water somewhere, you know, like in Kirtland Air Force Base, historically they had all these big unlined sewage lagoons, which was super common, you know, you put all of that in, that was a wastewater treatment method, and they created a perched aquifer because they put all this water here, and then it's got nitrate in it. Surprise, right? Like that's not that, but so then you're chasing that, trying to figure out where that is, but it's not necessarily continuous. And then does it infiltrate deeper? You know, is another question.
And then also, did you
You
test
gotta,
with the?
before you ask more questions, I'm gonna answer your prior
Sorry,
question.
okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's the point of having these discussions. You asked if there was any sampling at the airport. I know of none.
Right. And they're expanding right now too, so that's been a concern for me. I'm not sure, you know, if it should be or not, but it's just something I.
Well, and we've, under the support from Amy, we've reached out to the airport manager to get some of that historic data of when HFLF was used in the past and where.
Okay,
And
good.
so, like, we want to sample smartly too. And ultimately, it's the utility providing a lot of this funding to do the sampling. And I think it's meaningful to find at least one location that's maybe high likelihood. And if we have nothing there, one that makes me feel like it more might be not so effective use of money. And so just trying to be mindful with how we spend money.
And then sampling at the outsource or the water that's coming out of the treatment. That was my other question.
That has been sampled, and it's below the standard, but it does have PFAS in it.
Okay.
There was a question back here. Do you have a question?
No, okay. I'm sorry, that's my list of questions. I won't ask too many more.
If others have questions, I'll
Yes,
answer.
go ahead.
Please, I have a question. So putting this in line, because getting the grant money was just important to help people know what they have. But the condition was also to help identify where it is and where it's not. It sounds like we need to work closely to make sure that the variables that you are working against or with are part of this process. So I appreciate that. I gave clarification because it's in your head. Yeah. And I have to say, I like very much your presentation. Thank you. The application for getting this support isn't out yet, but if there's something that needs to be in there, would I call John? Would I call you? How would we make this, to make sure that we're working together?
Ultimately, anything I get, I talk to Amy about, and vice versa.
And we won't be the folks doing the county characterization project. I tried to get it, but I didn't get it. But they do a good job. They'll do a good job. And we're gonna make sure they have our data, and I'm gonna keep it. I know, you know, we know this is a small community. We all know each other. We all work together. So I'm really interested in this, and I want to be involved. So I'm gonna stay really apprised with their stuff. But they will be, once, you know, they've got to get their contracts in place, but they're gonna be another really good contact for you to make sure, because, you know, they can't just take data from, that you all give them from your home and plug it into their stuff without, they don't know how you collected your sample and, but if you show them your information, it can, same as what we're gonna do here, it can inform them because there's limited money. And so where do we spend this the most effectively? If you already know you have X, Y, and Z and you're already treating it, we don't really need to sample your well, but maybe, someone else, right? But so this kind of data sharing will help to inform everybody. And I really am excited about the split sampling ideas to be able to have,
And by the way,
all that.
I just sent you the email from the Army National Guard person asking for my signature. He won't have it until you tell me all the things you want. We'll do those.
That's great. So, for instance, in my case, where I have two side-by-side properties, one, the well was done about 30 years ago, the other one was done 7 years ago. I can look on my purchase docs to see if I can find information about the depths of those wells. But when I had BSN come out to test the water, and they tested for 21 PFAS, one had PFAS, the other had nothing of those 21.
Yeah.
But it was tested on the same day, and we know that BSN is a very reputable company. So maybe that kind of data is beneficial.
It's still useful, yeah. And so what's happening, so what kind of distance between them?
50 yards.
Yeah. So what's happening, it's not so much about how far apart they are on the land surface, it's what does the straw look like? Because it's a different straw. So you might have well construction information, for one of them, or the state engineer may.
does have
Yeah.
the depth of your well. A little research and you can do yourself online.
It's not 100%, but it's,
Right,
so
especially older ones, there needs
it's
to be a
worth looking.
grain of salt.
It's worth looking. And
It
then,
is.
as those of you that knew about that domestic well project that we did, there's like 1,000 domestic wells, right, out here, like 1,000, roughly, based on OSC records. Which then, when you're looking, especially when we put them all on a map, using OSC records, we used to have GPS, right? So those old records list a township range section, quarter, maybe quarter, like your best case scenario, you've got 3 quarters listed. So the map is only as good as that data that went into it. They have used those data to generate coordinates. Like I get coordinates for all these wells, and we put them on a map. But when we get real close, that may be your well or maybe your neighbor's well. Like we don't actually have, other than the new ones now have GPS coordinates. That's going to be a lot more accurate. But more than XY location on the ground surface, what's really important is what's going on under the ground. And then groundwater, one well may be affected and another well may not. But in general, we're more concerned, we only had those 6 wells, but we were more concerned about the far northeast La Cienega than we were anywhere else, based on only those 6. And now that you've gotten more information, you can start to refine those understandings. And they, as part of that characterization project, hopefully we'll figure that out, better and better and better.
And I do have to leave shortly. I just wanted to reiterate that there's a lot of effort put towards making sure the city and the county work together, and that certain other things don't get in the way because this is overly important. And those things need to just be put aside for a moment. And there's successes in accomplishing that. Something that a lot of people know likely is there's a PFAS MOA between the city and the county that was signed by both entities, and we received a copy. I hand delivered it from the county to the clerk and got my filed copy because just
What's an MOA?
memorandum of agreement.
Oh, okay.
So it's basically saying we'll share data, we'll collaborate on any applications. Ultimately there's known additional emerging contaminant funding available. And even though I think if the wastewater plant has PFAS coming out, the effluent, and it's below levels yes, we want to take care of it, I want to take care of it, I want to go obtain emergency contaminant funding money to address it, but if that doesn't have the most meaningful effect on dealing with something for the community, maybe I should leave that money alone for the other purpose. And so like those are really significant considerations, and that's why we need the consultants to go through the analysis to understand like there's limited money for anything and everything. So how do we do that?
I do have my, so I had a question about mapping, because actually the Valley Association, some people have voluntarily provided well results to us, which I'm holding, because I don't know what to do with them. You know, and these are people who are like, yeah, you can share it with whoever, but I still have been cautious because, so one of the things, you know, that our organization has talked about trying to help with is like some sort of, if it could be helpful in some way, but I think that's where the question is, you know, to have that data in any capacity. And I guess that's a really good question for you as a hydrologist who actually understands that, because it's been a concern for me, even just, not only just about the permissions involved and then mapping, and this is going to show someone's property, and how do you hide that and keep confidentiality to some extent and those sorts of things, but also just in terms of usefulness of the data, because somebody could have some piping that has PFAS in it, you know? And so what is your take on that?
I think that whatever data you're able to share is of great use and importance. And then, you know, I won't be doing that sampling to, you know, I'm super interested in looking at it, thinking about it, but, you know, what we're doing is specific right now to this facility, but we can also share it with the folks that are going to, you know, as soon as they get their contract in place, they'll start working on the project. So you can, you know, it's totally legitimate to share that information, and then they just use it to inform what they're doing, you know, and maybe they're going to go resample.
Because there are definitely areas where you'll see like almost all the homeowners on this stretch of street are going to have positive results, or, you know, so I think it is helpful.
It would be very informative, because then you can figure out, like, do we resample there, or do we, you know, it helps you to pick where you're going to target.
Okay, because I haven't been pushing to ask people for that, but if it can be useful, then I may make that, like, or we may talk about making that an initiative.
And then I think that would be really, I mean, I'm speaking, you know, for someone else really, but as a overall, what's important to really characterizing out here, I think that would be super useful. And you don't necessarily have to put the specific locations in a report, you know, as was done for that. We didn't put those addresses on the, you know, like that information is, you know, some people have that information, but it's not published information. They gave them blind names, and you don't need that out there in the world, right? So if the specific location can be utilized to figure out what you're doing, that's helpful. But yeah, I don't think you have to put people's names and addresses in any kind of report. And you can always make your size of your, you know, like it's fine that IDs are on here. That's nobody's house, right? It's fine that we know where that is. But if that symbol were like a lot bigger, or maybe even not on there, that you don't have to show individual people's homes. Yes.
Is there going to be any testing of the river water?
For PFAS?
Yeah.
I don't know what the schedule is that the city's doing of the wastewater effluent that's released to the river. Outside of that, I don't know of any that's planned in the river. I don't know anything about what the folks have planned for the characterization project. That would be a question for them. I mean, to me, I'm much more interested in wells, because I want to know who's drinking PFAS and get it treated. But, you know, if you have all the money in the world to characterize and really figure all the things out, it would be one of the things on the list. So I don't know what they're going to want to do.
A lot of the Hollywood Street block, so that's an issue. The other thing is soil sampling. The Forest Guardians, Wildlife Guardians, wetlands. Is there going to be soil sampling of that area?
Nothing that's planned. All that I have on the docket now is this, specific to the facility. So I don't know. You want, bigger picture, you could ask John about that, but nothing else is,
It would be nice to have some points between like where people actually live and are taking the water and that treatment plant.
yeah, no, it would,
yeah.
right? It would, and I don't think I did a very good job of having a map that showed all that. No, I don't have a map, but there's nothing, right? Like, there's nothing between, it's a couple miles, there's nothing. So, you can put monitor wells in, and when you do that, you would sample the soil as you're going down. You collect soil samples as you're drilling your well, so that you make sure you don't have an issue, or whatever, you define whatever the concentrations are, and then you put your well in, and then you have a really good place that you can always collect a sample from in the future. You have to figure out land ownership and make sure you have access for that. But again, those are expensive. So how do you want to spend your money? And I don't know what their plans are, but if you put in very many monitor wells out, it's the whole budget of the project, right? So
I've got one, I think this is my last question. But is there any data on how long it takes for PFAS from the surface to actually penetrate into the ground and how quickly that occurs? And does it just go down forever? Does it stop somewhere? I mean, is there any data on
I'm
any of
sure
that?
there is, but I don't have it. I don't have
Okay,
it.
cool, yeah.
This, all of the things out here have been, the practices have been happening out there for so long. The groundwater moves really slowly, but it's, been moving for decades.
I just wanted to say one thing, that this is so great, Edie. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
It's super informative. We have one more question up here.
If we're gonna sample our wells, what's recommended, like the 5 or the 40, or is there something you might hear that tells you? Like how many chemicals of that PFAS?
Probably any of them would be great. The different methods are I'm struggling to find the right word, but they're specific to purpose. Like there's this method that I'm using, 1633. It's for all of the non-drinking water.
Okay.
But I spoke to, there's a man, he actually lives in Albuquerque, but he's really knowledgeable about PFAS testing, and he's on one of the national kind of sampling and committees. So I've hounded him about methods a whole lot as I was figuring out what we wanted to propose. Because the state's relatively new to all this stuff too. They needed the information also. So 1633 is fine to use for your wells, but I think really that having the data, the 24, if you're using it's 533 and 537.1, I think are the methods for drinking water. Either of those are totally fine also. But this one, you get a longer list. I think we'll not see detections for a lot of things probably out of 40, but it doesn't hurt to look for them all. Yeah. But if you did it already, I don't think you need to run out there and do this method if you have the data.
I didn't hear about it until yesterday. None of this. I live right in the middle of the city. Where I've been.
One more?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Sign up for our listserv.
How far is the contamination here in this community?
We don't know.
We don't know.
No.
You have no clue.
No.
Okay, that's right.
So
That's what all
is
this
the
is about.
government still using that chemical at the airport and all that? Are they still contaminating our water?
Well, I think that there's multiple sources, not just that chemical. And I don't know,
Well, when will you guys find out what you know? What is happening to our community here?
So the county is pushing forward their characterization project. It's getting started real soon. They're doing the contracting right now for a firm that's gonna do a bunch of work. And the job of that project is to characterize the extent of the contamination. So there will be more sampling happening as a part of that project. But to date, there hasn't been, other than what people have done at their own homes, which I don't have that information. You know, I know about the 6 wells that we sampled, and I know about what's happening at the wastewater facility, you know, but it is not characterized.
So is the National Guard and that's still using that chemical?
They are
Or
supposed to
nobody's
phase
gonna
that
stop them,
out.
they're just gonna continue like they're doing in Clovis and all that?
And I can say one thing, so the last time they used the fire truck where they sprayed the firefighting foam was in the early 2000s. So if there is contamination that's in drinking water that came from there, which we don't know yet if it came from there because they're kind of claiming it's isolated. But if that's where it's coming from, then it could have been in our water since sometime in the early 2000s. We don't know how fast it spreads. But that's why the county is in the process. This all was just discovered last year for the first time, just so you know. So since then, we've been in the process of trying to get all these government players involved, trying to educate the community, trying to get resources up. And now, you know, they're starting to, all the government entities are starting to move forward in testing and trying to find what's happening, where it's going. And that's really where it's at. So.
And the National Guard is doing their own, they have a federal process that's the CERCLA process to do their characterization, and they've done some sampling, but it's pretty limited. So they're doing more soon. So was it September, the September meeting? They're going to come and talk about their, you know, their sampling that's specific to their facility. But like John was talking about, we're looking to, we want to meet them out there and collect samples from their wells on the same day so that we get all of that information as well. And that MOA is an agreement that says we're going to work together in A, B, and C, you know, like it lists all the ways they're going to work together. The city and county are doing a lot of those types of things. So, well, and everybody's limited in their funds, so if we coordinate, we can figure out how to best move this forward to thoroughly characterize it and ensure that people have.
That's fantastic that you're all collaborating.
Unless you
I want to close, I know a lot of people need to leave, but I just want to say thank you to all of you. Everyone else on your questions.
I just want to push that you all just Google Santa Fe County PFAS webpage, and if you subscribe to the newsletter, I put it out monthly, and it has, like, I send out a copy of that MOA. I'll put the report that I get from Amy. Like, there's information there that's, you know, all about what we're doing here. So I just want to encourage you to do that.
The big test